Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And this evening, we have author Kristina Forest with us. We're going to be talking about her newest book, which is The Partner Plot. Thank you so much for making some time for us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, The Partner Plot actually comes out next week, if I am correct. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
So in the future, we're going to just be wishing future you happy pub day.
Thank you.
So for our listeners who aren't yet familiar with the partner plot and waiting for the 27th to come, can you give us an overview of what the story is about?
Yeah, so the partner plot is about high school sweethearts Violet and Xavier who had sort of just like a very tumultuous, sort of passionate, I guess, relationship as teenagers. And they thought that they were going to get married and live happily ever after, but they broke up in college and they haven't spoken since. And almost a decade after their breakup, they happened to run into each other in Las Vegas. Violet is a celebrity stylist, and Xavier is a teacher at their old high school. And they drink too much and wake up the next morning with wedding rings on their fingers. And they decide that keeping up the lie, I guess, of being married is going to benefit both of their careers. So they keep it going. But of course, old feelings die hard and they all come back. So that's the book.
Well, those high school sweethearts and those first loves, they hit differently. And so I definitely love that idea of exploring that through a rom-com, through that lens of, especially through writing, you could have so much fun with with the second chance trope. We've been talking about tropes a lot lately. And I just I have never really known what my favorite trope is, but I love how in rom-coms, particularly, um, every author takes a familiar trope, a known trope, but they put their own unique spin on it in their own world that they've created and these characters and just make it completely unique to that particular book. How is what are some of your favorite tropes to play with as a writer versus as a reader to read?
Mm, that's interesting because I don't think that I have written a trope yet that I don't love to read. It's more so like the other way around. Like there are some tropes that I really love to read that I don't think that I would write. Um, like Secret Baby or like Surprise Pregnancy. I don't see myself writing those, but I do love to read them. I think what I've been doing so far in my career is writing all the tropes that I've really loved and like I hold dear. And just like you're saying, putting my own spin on them. So like for this book, I've always loved Marriage of Convenience, particularly in historical romance, because that was like my entryway into romance in general, was reading historical romance novels. Um, and Marriage of Convenience is probably my favorite trope of all the tropes. And I just wanted to see it done in a contemporary setting. Um, yeah, I think so. I think that's more so. I'm just like trying to work through all the ones that I didn't get to yet.
So is this isn't your first romance, obviously, but you've done historical as well?
No, I read a lot of historical. I don't think that's just in general. I don't think I would write historical because it's, like you have like I feel like historical romance for me does what I imagine fantasy does for people who read a lot of fantasy, like the escapism. It's just like
Mhm.
different societal rules and time. Like that's what historical romance does for me. And it's like my happy place. And so I don't want to start writing
I
it and then it starts to feel like a job. So yeah.
I completely understand where you're coming from because it's actually the exact opposite for me. I write historical fiction, but I read a lot of
Oh,
romance. So
got
that's
you.
my like happy escape.
Exactly. Yeah.
You got to keep your happy places happy.
I mean, there's no, especially in this business, never say never when it comes to a book, whether, an idea will pop into your head and it'll like grab onto you like a dog with a bone and just won't let go. And then you end up having to like try to run with it. But at the same time, it's not, odds are you're going to be in that genre. You're going to want to stay in that genre that you love. Because it's once you're
Right.
in there, there's like all this other like marketing stuff that is a whole other podcast in and of itself.
Exactly.
So, Wine, Women, and Words over the years has really kind of evolved into a writer's workshop. And we love to just pick everyone's brains and learn about the writing that goes into actually writing a book. And one thing that immediately, I immediately love Violet and Karina. Like it
Oh,
just
yeah.
from the sec I don't even know what it was, but the moment they from their first interaction, so much fun to read, and I love their origin story that they got trapped in an elevator together. And this is very early in the book, so it's not a spoiler. Um,
Mhm.
but those female friendships are so much fun to read. And as a writer, how do you get to know your characters um, and create those bonds it while you're putting them on the page for the reader to then later fall in love with?
Yeah, so I guess the short answer to that is that I do character questionnaires before I start writing a draft.
Oh,
And
cool.
so, yeah, and so the questionnaires, it starts with really basic questions like, what's your name? What do you look like? What is your career? Or what are your favorite hobbies? Who are your family members? And among that is like, who are your friends? What do you like about your friends? And then it asks other questions like, what do you like about yourself? What don't you like about yourself? And then it's like more important, like deeper things, like if you had a secret, who would you tell? Who wouldn't you tell? And so I do that for every book, for every character that's going to have a POV. I do that character questionnaire, and I answer those questions in their voice. And usually when I'm doing that, I'm like listening to a song that I feel like is something that they would listen to or like reminds me of them. And so that's kind of how I like the preliminary step to fleshing out a character. And when it comes to female friendships specifically, I think I've just been really lucky to like at every stage of my life, I've always had a really great group of girlfriends. And so I really am just like writing how we speak and how we relate to each other and um, trying to make the fictional relationships feel as authentic to the ones in my real life. So it's actually very easy to write friendship for me because I don't usually write friendships with drama. Well, that's not true. For the most part, I don't. So it's usually pretty easy.
I love the fact that you brought up the questionnaire, the character questionnaire.
I
And
love that.
yeah, and like just being able to like do like sit down and do like these workshops for your writing. And I think a lot of authors, especially young authors, or actually any phase that you're in, the writing, you feel like, okay, yeah, I have to sit down and I have to write. I have to do all of this writing in my novel, and just right. But yet there's so much to the back end of things too, where I love my go-to is the breakout novel. I like doing the exercises in that to develop the
Mm.
characters. And there's a whole like workbook that goes with it, but there is something to be said for just being able to sit down and just work on it because it is part of the work, getting to know them.
Yeah, and I try to do a lot of that work beforehand because I guess every writer looks at it differently, right? Like some people like to go in without an outline. They like the discoverability of it. But I feel like I'm wasting my time. If I start working on something and I realize I'm going the wrong way, I get really upset with myself. And I'm like, I just wasted weeks of work when I could have been, going this way. And so I really try to avoid that by doing all that back end work. I have the character questionnaire. I do a really big free write. I have a very detailed outline. I do like a plot arc chart. I do so much. I mean, and
You're my
ultimately,
kind of
as
girl. You
I'm
are so my kind of girl.
can you tell I'm type A? But like I try to do so much ahead of time. But also because once I start writing, I want to feel like I have like slipped on like a Snuggie and I'm just in the story and I can just keep going. And I hate the feeling of like I'm getting stopped up, like, oh wait, like would this person do this? Like I want to already know that once I'm in the draft. Um, every book is not that easy. Some are easier to get into that way than others, but that's ultimately my goal every time.
And I
I
also find
apologize. Oh, you go.
okay. Well, I also find it comforting that like if the book does take a turn, you know how the characters would react. You know how
Right.
where the story should develop from there because you already have this sense of okay, again, anybody who has listened to this podcast knows my analogy about getting to the 7-Eleven to get your slushie. You you took that deviant, that turn and you stopped at the flower shop, you pet that puppy, and then you wound up at the slushie stand ultimately by the end of your story. But having that outline and that roadmap is I find just so helpful to
Yeah.
and also the idea that outlines aren't this one monolithic thing that you just I don't know with you, Kristina, are you the same way where like I had an outline for this book that I'm working on. I started working on it and I was like, wait, no, I'm gonna need to stop and I need to rework this outline. And I just like
All
to
the
go
time.
and rework the outline.
All the time. For the partner plot specifically, like I had a whole outline. I did all the stuff that I just told you guys I did. I wrote 25,000 words in the first draft and I realized the beginning was all wrong. So I started completely over. And that was like 3 weeks worth of work every day. No, it was almost like a month that I spent writing those 25,000 words. And then I just had to start over and I was so mad. But, ultimately, like, the work that you trash ends up, what they say about it ends up, no word is a wasted word. That's true. But in the moment, it's very
And
frustrating.
were you on contract as well when it happened?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I
Oh.
feel the pain.
So that's another reason why I was like, oh, great. Like,
And I love what you said, Diana, about how Christina, you do these questionnaires and just being able to, even if you detour, knowing how your character would react and being able to immediately get into their mindset and be like, okay, well, Violet wasn't supposed to go that way, but I know how she's going to handle the situation. I think that is so, I've never thought of that before, but I think that is such a good thing to remember in the writing process, that it's really most important that you know your characters almost versus the
mm,
story.
yeah,
So
exactly.
that's our TED talk for the night.
Well, when it comes to characters, it's a matter of what came first, the chicken or the egg, and what comes first, your plot or your characters. What
Mm-hmm.
drives your story? Is it your characters or is it the plot? Now, I would imagine, and I don't. We have already established I don't write the romances. Kristina does that. And for you, Kristina, do you feel like if in romance in general, just speaking in generalities, do you feel that like romances are more character driven, or do you think that they're more plot driven? Because there is usually a formula to writing a romance.
I That's a great question. I ultimately think, at least in the contemporary space, like if it's a romance thriller, romance mystery, I think that those tend to be a little bit more plot driven. But in terms of contemporary, majority of the time they're character driven,
Mhm.
I think. Um, because I mean, the bones of a romance are about two people falling in love. Who are they? Why do they love the way that they do? Why are they afraid of being in love? Like, what makes this person the way that they are? And that's a lot. It's a lot of character work that goes into that. So I'm going to say, at least in the contemporary space, character driven, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But I'm sure somebody else would answer that differently.
No, I'm sure. I mean, there's no one way to write a book. There's going to be
Yeah.
no one way to answer any of those questions at all.
So in preparation for the interview, I was on your Instagram in a completely non-creepy way.
You don't have to worry about putting out any kind of like stalker alerts or anything on Michelle yet.
It was completely innocent, but I always feel like, oh, I researched you. um, but I saw that you have a book tour coming up, and that just sounds so
Oh
exciting.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're going to be in New Jersey, DC, like a bunch of different places. Is this the first book tour that you're going to be doing, or have you gone on one before?
No. I had for my debut YA novel, I went on a book tour in 2019. And then in 2020, everything was virtual. 2021, I didn't have a book come out. 2022 was the first year that I did in-person events again, but I only had one, just like a launch event. And in 2023, I also did I did a couple events in 2023, but late. I'm like, what? In the fall, I think. In the late summer, it was like not during the launch week. I only had one event, but like different events came up toward the end of the year. But this is the first time that I'll be doing like consistent events during like launch time. Since 2019, it was 5 years ago, which is right. Was that 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years ago.
Yeah, like
It
which is
all blurs. It's okay. It's all
yeah.
blurs.
I mean,
We're
in my
writers, not
mind,
mathematicians.
in my mind, 2000 was still 10 years ago. So I
Yeah,
refuse to
so
accept that
yeah.
it's 24 years ago was 2000. I refuse.
Okay, Stacy's mom.
Excuse me. But that's really, I love I've never published a book, but I just love the idea of doing an actual book tour and getting out and meeting the readers. What is that like for you? Do you love it? Do you get nervous? Is it kind of a mixed bag for you?
I do love it, especially well, because like it almost feels like I'm going in like eyes wide open and I'm not sure what to expect because it's been so long since I've done events in different cities like like before. And it's also the first time that I will be meeting with a lot of romance readers because the first time that I went on tour was it was YA and it was like a group of YA. I went on a group tour, so it was a group of YA authors.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so this will be the first time that I will be meeting a lot of people in person who've like read The Neighbor Favor, which is my first adult romance that came out last year. So it's gonna be a new experience for me, and so I'm kind of just hoping that people come to the event.
And for
And yeah.
oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off right.
No, that's all I was gonna say.
Um, so for switching from YA to romance, do you find that there is a difference in the writing style or what you have to like put into the
Mm,
novel versus what you can just get away with in the novel?
for sure. I think that, so my adult romance novels are third person past tense dual point of view. And my first two YA novels were single point of view, first person. My third one actually was dual POV, past tense. Um, you know, it's interesting because I feel like obviously the content is a little different when you're writing about adults versus teenagers, and there are things in dialogue specifically that I can get away with more in adult. When I'm writing YA, I do write with the understanding that I feel like I have a responsibility to to the youth, to kind of I kind of want to write. I mean, obviously, I write romance, so that's hopeful as well. But I feel like I can be a little bit more cynical with like the mindsets of my adult characters because they're like in their late 20s, early 30s. They've had other adult life experiences, and for teenagers, I think I try to like make just have like a bigger sense of hope for them
Mhm.
in those stories. Um, yeah, I haven't written a YA in a few years, a couple years. I'm like clearly struggling with time. Happened. But it's been yeah, I wrote my last YA in 2020. So it has been a few years. It was like 4 years ago that I wrote my last YA. So uh but there definitely is a difference in approach and like I'm writing with a certain audience in mind for the different projects.
It's hard to believe that 2020 was just a few years ago because it was such a shock, I think, on all of our systems, and especially in the writing
Yeah.
community, that it still feels like such a tantamount like year.
Yeah, it's like a black hole. Those like
Yes.
21, 22 for me, 2020 to like the first half of 2022 really feels like I don't know what happened. Here we
Hmm.
are.
It's like a blank spot in a book. It's
Yeah.
just the blank pages. Um, so switching gears over, I know we're just about at our time, but we always love to ask what you're reading right now. What just for fun? What are you obsessed with at the moment for books?
So right now I'm reading Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert.
Mm.
It was a YA that she wrote last year, a YA romance. And on my TBR, I have The Catch by Amy Leah, as well as How You Get the Girl by Anita Kelly.
Mm.
See, the dangerous thing about this question, we it just adds like the TBR list
Mhm.
will never ever end.
And that's kind of comforting in a way that
But yes,
we have
you'll
more
you'll
books than
never
we
you'll,
could ever read.
I like
Yeah.
how you look at it that way. I That's anxiety inducing for me.
Well, this is the girl who's perfectly okay with chaos, and I have stuff that I will never get to. I have books I will never get to, but they are there, and I have no reason to get bored ever because I could just pick up a book. If I don't like it, I'll pick up a different one.
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it.
Glass half full, Michelle. Glass half
Yes,
full.
well, my glass is half empty right now, but that's okay. It's for a good reason. Well, so this may come out on Pub Day in a perfect world, but this is not a
We'll aim
perfect
for it.
world. So it may come out slightly after Pub Day. So happy Pub Week for you for whenever this episode does air.
Thank you.
Um, and everyone, if you would like to order your own copy of The Partner Plot, it is now out in the world when you're listening to this. So be sure to check out the link in our show notes to our bookshop on bookshop.org to order your own copy. As always, bookshop.org supports our incredible writers. It supports the podcast, but most importantly, it supports all the wonderful indie bookstores out there. And Kristina, thank you so much for setting some time aside for us tonight and coming to hang out. My dog has gotten a hold of a chew toy, so I don't know if you can hear that in the background. I just hear it squeaking away right now. But thank you so much for making time for us. We've had so much fun chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice talking to you.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye. Oh, okay, bye.
I thought I hit record.